And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Rugby Review. This week, we're going to be going through round 3 of the Nations Championship and the Nations Cup. So we'll kick it off with the Nations Championship and then move into the Nations Cup in the second half of the episode. So with that being said, let's take a look at the final results for round 3 in the Nations Championship. So here we have the final results of all 6 games from round 3. We kicked off round 3 with the highly anticipated matchup of New Zealand versus Ireland, where New Zealand ended up securing the victory by a score of 40-21 over the Irish. This was very strong, very dominant performance by New Zealand, especially in the first half of the game. They were very much in control of the first half of the game. Ireland did try to make a comeback and a push in the second half, but the All Blacks were able to handle that pressure, handle that momentum that the Irish were trying to push and take. New Zealand kept scoring, kept matching the Irish try for try, kept their lead, and ended up securing a very strong bonus point victory to end the first leg of this championship. So New Zealand ended up, with a perfect 3-0 record throughout this first leg of the championship, and obviously New Zealand will look to continue their strong performance going into the second half of the championship when round 4 happens much later in November. Game 2 was played between Japan and France, where France ended up securing a very dominant victory over the Japanese by a score of 42-15. Now, the game started off between Japan and France as a pretty close competition, but as the game went on, France did a much better job converting scoring opportunities than the Japanese did. So with the higher conversion rate of opportunities, France ended up scoring more tries and then obviously getting the bonus point victory here. So this was a very strong performance by France to end the first leg of this tournament on the best note they possibly could. Moving into our third game, to me this was a big game between Australia and Italy. Both teams had not won a game moving into round 3. So through the first 2 rounds, Australia and Italy had not won a game. So that kind of, to me, set the stage for a very high-stress game for both teams wanting to secure that first victory. And obviously, as you can see, Australia secured a very dominant win over the Italians, winning by a score of 57-10. Again, just an absolute dominant performance by Australia from start to finish. Great way for Australia to end the first leg of this tournament. Difficult for Italy. They did not play their best rugby, especially in round 3. Haven't played that well in the first 3 rounds of this tournament, to be honest, which is kind of unfortunate because in the Six Nations, Italy was very well organized, high effort defensively. They were able to put phase play together on offense, but I guess since it's the end of a long professional season and international season for a lot of these Italian players, could have been end of season fatigue kicking in. But anyway, strong bonus point victory for Australia. Ends the first leg of this tournament on a very high note, and it sends the head coach Joe Schmidt off on a very high note as well. We have Les Kiss taking over for Australia's rugby team when this team will be playing again in November. Moving on to the fourth game, that was between Fiji and Scotland, and despite the outcome, this was a much better performance by Fiji in round 3 as opposed to round 2. So again, Scotland ended up winning this game, getting a bonus point victory winning by a score of 33-17. And I say this is an improvement for Fiji because they let up 70 plus points to England in round 2. So the fact that Scotland only scored 33 and Fiji was able to score multiple tries and have a dominant first half was much improved for Fiji. So again, dominant first half for Fiji, but in the second half, Scotland was just so much better. So much possession, so much territory. Scotland had so much offensive pressure on Fiji that you could just tell that Fiji was wearing away and tiring out in the second half because of all the defensive effort they put in. So, again, not the outcome that Fiji would have wanted, but I think Fiji can take a bit of a positive note away from this game with the significant improvement in performance from round 2 to 3, and then this was a very, very good way for Scotland to end the first leg of this tournament with a bonus point victory, put Scotland in a really good position to be up towards the higher end of the table. We'll look at that in a minute here. So, not a bad way for both teams to end the first leg of this tournament. Fifth game of round 3 was probably the most one-sided game of round 3. This game was between South Africa and Wales, and South Africa ended up winning by a score of 43-0 over Wales. Not much to say about this game. It was just a very dominant performance in the first and second half by the Springboks, and it, as you can imagine, it all started up front by South Africa. South Africa's forward pack, in scrums especially, absolutely dominated Wales for the entire 80 minutes. And then in the back line, South Africa, not the best conversion rate in the first half. They had a couple of handling errors when they could have had a couple of scoring opportunities, but didn't really hurt them because they had plenty of opportunities in the second half, cutting the Wales defensive line into ribbons. There was just gaps and holes in the Wales defensive line that South Africa was able to exploit all game, and just were able to secure, and South Africa was able to secure a very strong, dominant bonus point victory. Again, one of the many teams having a very strong end to the first leg of this tournament. And then the sixth and final game of round 3 was, I would say was the best game. It was the closest game, and in my perspective, had the most intensity to it. Was the game between Argentina and England. England ended up getting the victory by a score of 31-24. This was definitely a game of two halves because England was the much stronger, much more dominant team. In the first half, Argentina looked like they were lacking energy, organization, and physicality in that first half, but Argentina was able to turn it around in the second half and get back into the game. And I'll just leave it at there was a controversial ending to the game where the referees decided that the try attempt by Delguy at the end of the game wasn't actually a try, so Argentina didn't end up getting the try bonus point. They just walked away with a losing bonus point, so is what it is at the end of the game. Argentina will feel like maybe they got slighted by the referee, but at the same point in time, if you watched the first half of the game, Argentina could have done a lot more to put themselves in a position to win the game instead of having to make a dramatic comeback. So, tough loss for Argentina. They probably didn't play up to their standards and didn't play in a manner that they wanted to, but all credit to England going to Argentina, going into the belly of the beast, and getting a road victory. So this was very strong bonus point victory for England, sets England up very well for the second half of this tournament when that happens in November. So again, here are the final results of round 3, and then let's take a quick look at the standings for the Nations Championship after the third round. So here we have the final standings to the Nations Championship after round 3. On the Northern Hemisphere side, we see France sitting at the top of the table, followed by Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, and then right at the bottom at number 6 is Italy. And then on the Southern Hemisphere side, South Africa is still sitting at the top of the table, with New Zealand sitting at the number 2 seed. And then the only difference between these two teams here is the points difference. So based off the teams that South Africa has played, the margins of victory have been much greater, which gives them the advantage over New Zealand and the higher seed. And then after New Zealand, there's Australia, followed by Argentina, then Japan, with Fiji sitting at the bottom in the 6th seed. So these are the final standings again after the first leg of the tournament. We see that the Northern Hemisphere has the slight edge and advantage, with many more teams having winning records and more overall points. So we'll see going into the final 3 rounds of the tournament if the Southern Hemisphere team can kind of turn it around a little bit and have some have some results go in their favor and make a little bit of a comeback and even out the win-loss ratio between the two hemispheres. So that's round 3, and then let's quickly look at the game schedule for round 4. And again, round 4 will not be taking place until the first weekend of November. So these games are quite a few months out, so these are not happening anytime soon. The first game looks like it's going to kick off Friday, November 6th. So match 1 of round 4 will feature Ireland versus Argentina. Match 2 will be played between Scotland and New Zealand. Match 3 will feature Wales versus Japan. Match 4 is France versus Fiji. And then we'll see Italy versus South Africa. And the 6th and final game of round 4 for the Nations Championship will be England versus Australia. So this will be a fun round to watch when it happens in the future in November. And that is it for the Nations Championship. Let's switch gears and look at the third round for the Nations Cup. So again, the Nations Cup is the Tier 2 competition that is being played. And here we have the final scores for round 3 of the Nations Cup. So match 1 saw a very, very high-scoring game between Samoa and Romania, where Romania ended up winning the game by a score of 38-37. So very high-scoring. What ended up being a very close game. It was good for Romania to secure that first victory of the tournament here, and they just edged out Samoa. So this was, edge of your seat stuff here. Very high-scoring, very entertaining game. Both teams ended up walking away with try bonus points, and not that Samoa wants to lose the game, but they do walk away with a losing bonus point in addition to that try bonus point. So, when you're trying to score as many points as possible, walking away with 2 losing bonus points is never a bad thing, just not really what you want. But anyway, moving into match 2 was the highest scoring game of round 3 in the Nations Cup, where we saw Uruguay versus Hong Kong, China, and Hong Kong, China ended up securing their first victory of the Nations Cup, winning by a score of 42-40 over Uruguay. So another really high-scoring, really entertaining game, back and forth. The combined score was 82 points between the two teams. Bonus points, scoring bonus points for both teams, Uruguay, just like Samoa, does end up walking away with a losing bonus point and a scoring bonus point. And then, again, Hong Kong, China secures their first victory, and not just any victory, a lovely bonus point victory at that. So, really good way for Hong Kong, China to end the first leg of this competition. Now, moving into match 3, this was one of 2 games that I highlighted last episode, which was the Chile versus Georgia match. Now, this was not a very close game by and large. Georgia dominated this game, and they ended up winning by a score of 49-22 over Chile. Now, the reason why I highlighted this particular episode last episode, was because after 2 rounds of the Nations Cup, Chile was sitting at the number 1 seed in their pool, in Pool A, and Georgia was sitting at the number 1 seed at the top of Pool B. So this was, a matchup between the 2 number 1 seeds after the second round. So I thought this was a very important game to watch. The 2 number 1 seeds going at it, high level of competition, but ended up being a one-sided game where Georgia walks away with a dominant bonus point victory, and Chile did not walk away with any points, no scoring bonus points, obviously lost by way more than 7, so, Georgia probably trying to make a statement of, we are still the dominant team in the Tier 2 competition. Moving on to match 4, another high-scoring game, another very close game. This game was between Tonga and Portugal. Portugal ended up winning the game by a score of 32-28 over Tonga. So again, high-scoring game. Both teams ended up having bonus point. Both can't have bonus point victories, but both ended up having try-scoring bonus points, and then Tonga does walk away with a losing bonus point, having only lost by 4 points here. So, good victory for Portugal over Tonga to walk away with a bonus point at the end of round 3. And just like Samoa and Uruguay, not necessarily the result Tonga would have been looking for, but when you're trying to score as many points as possible in a competition, you'll take whatever points you can get. So the 2 points for Tonga at the end of round 3, again, not what they wanted, but you'll take it. Moving into match 5, this was the second game that I highlighted in round 2's video, and the reason for that was because USA plus Spain were both sitting at the number 2 seeds in each of their pools. So USA was the 2nd seed in Pool A, Spain was the number 2 seed in Pool B, and go USA. USA ended up having a bonus point victory over Spain, and USA won by a score of 29-22 over Spain. So USA not only gets the victory, but the bonus point, and then Spain does walk away with a losing bonus point, but not the try-scoring bonus point. So, obviously as a USA fan, this is great to see the USA get off to a 3-0 start to this tournament, and fingers crossed they can keep up this good momentum in November when the competition picks back up again. And to round out round 3 in the Nations Cup, we have Canada versus Zimbabwe. Canada ended up winning this game by a score of 23-19 over Zimbabwe. So, if I remember correctly, Canada lost last week, so good for Canada to bounce back and get a victory, not a bonus point victory, but a victory nonetheless over Zimbabwe. And then, like all the other losing teams, not necessarily the result Zimbabwe wants, but since it was only a 4-point margin of victory for Canada, Zimbabwe does walk away with a losing bonus point. So, Not the worst thing in the world, but obviously not the result Zimbabwe wants. But, you'll take whatever points you can get, by and large, in these types of competitions. So that's the final results for round 3. Let's take a look at the standings real quick, and then we can look at the game schedule for round 4. So here, again, we have the overall standings for the first leg of the competition. We have the USA sitting at the number 1 seed in Pool A, followed by Chile, then Samoa, which Samoa is followed by Tonga, then Canada, with Uruguay sitting at the bottom of the table for Pool A. And then Pool B, Georgia sitting at the number 1 seed, followed by Portugal, then Spain. Romania is at the 4 seed, Hong Kong, China is at the 5 seed, and then we see Zimbabwe sitting at the bottom of the table in Pool B. So, final standings after round 3. It'll be interesting to see what type of movement up and down the ladder will happen as the final 3 rounds progress in the tournament. And very similar to the Nations Championship, the Nations Cup will resume in the first week of November. So, I'm not sure. I guess all games will be played November 7th. But we have the first game of round 4 will be between Georgia and Tonga. That game will be followed by Hong Kong, China versus Canada. Match 3 of this round will be played between Portugal and Samoa. That game will be followed by Romania versus the USA. The 5th match of round 4 will feature Spain versus Chile, and then to round out round 4, the final match of the round will feature both teams sitting at the bottom of their tables, Zimbabwe versus Uruguay. So this will be a pretty important game to see if Uruguay or Zimbabwe can get that victory to get off the bottom of the table. So that is it for this week's episode. If you made it this far in the episode, I greatly appreciate it. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you know somebody who might be interested in watching this video, please feel free to share it with them. Again, I appreciate everybody who has made it this far in the video. Thanks a bunch, and I hope you all enjoy whatever rugby you're watching this week. Have a good one, and I will see you next time.